From a young age, Roxane Gay was writing stories. But over the years, she developed her skills beyond just storytelling. Her voice became a battle cry that helped jumpstart a modern-day feminist movement.
Please welcome Roxane Gay.
But how did this quiet child of Haitian immigrants turn her own harsh path through life into a spot at the top of all the bestsellers lists?
Time magazine declared 2014 the year of Roxane Gay.
And on a written journey towards breaking big. What makes people successful? What are the unexpected turns in life that propel people to greatness? I'm Careless Watson, editor of OZY. I'm out to uncover the real secrets behind breaking big.
The story of my body is not a story of triumph. This is not a weight loss memoir. There will be no picture of a thin version of me, my slender body emblazoned across this book's cover, with me standing in one leg of my former, fatter self's jeans. This is not a book that will offer motivation. I don't have any powerful insight into what it takes to overcome an unruly body and unruly appetites. Mine is not a success story. Mine is simply a true story. I wish so very much that I could write a book about triumphant weight loss and how I learned to live more effectively with my demons. I wish I could write a book about being at peace and loving myself wholly at any size. Instead, I have written this book, which has been the most difficult writing experience of my life, one far more challenging than I could have ever imagined.
How did you come to writing? Did you come easily to?
I did.
Okay.
I've been writing since I was 4 years old. I just always loved telling little stories, and the older I got, the bigger the stories became. But I've always written, and I've always loved writing.
She was only 4 years old. So she couldn't physically write with the pen, so she used a typewriter. And she started writing stories.
How did you become good? I mean, is that a nature, is that a nurture thing?
I do think that some people are born with an innate talent for creativity, and I teach, so I do believe you can teach writing, absolutely, but you can't make someone have the spark. So I think it was both that I had some innate ability to write, but I was also nurtured as a writer at home.
Who was at home nurturing you?
My parents both came from poor families in Haiti, and they came to the United States separately and met here in the US, in New York.
How did the family end up in Nebraska?
My dad's company was headquartered in Omaha, and so he would always go back to headquarters after he completed assignment. He builds tunnels.
The neighborhood we lived, there were very few non-whites. We were outsider in the neighborhood.
She was a loner. I saw all the children playing together, and she was by herself. So when I asked the teacher, why do you think she wants to be alone? She says that's what she likes to do. Was it because she was the only non-white child in her class? The teacher saw it differently than I did.
She had a lot of different interests than her peers. She was always reading, and she was also a very fast reader.
2 or 3 books in one day. So, library.
And as a little one, what kind of books was Roxane grabbing from the library?
I was reading everything. My parents did not censor my reading.
When a child feels different, taking in other people's negative views, finding evidence for your own problems, your own inferiority, you can either fight back with that world or you can discover another world.
Making yet another move, Roxane and her family headed back east to New Jersey. And it was here that Roxane's life would change forever.
Christopher and I were friends, or at least shared a semblance of friendship. During school hours, he would ignore me, but after school, we would hang out. We would do whatever he wanted. He was always in control of the time we spent together. In truth, he treated me terribly, and I thought I should be grateful that he bothered to treat me terribly. That he bothered with a girl like me at all. I had no reason to have such low self-esteem at 12 years old. I had no reason to allow myself to be treated terribly. It happened anyway.
I don't come to it easily, but tell me about what happened when you were 12.
When I was 12, I was gang raped by a group of boys. It was in an abandoned hunting cabin in the woods behind our neighborhood. In the aftermath, I did not tell anyone.
Why did you not tell anyone?
Because I was young. I was 12 years old, and I felt a lot of shame. We were Catholic, so premarital sex was a sin. I did not have the vocabulary to articulate the difference between sex and rape. So in my head, I had had sex even though I knew I didn't want it, and I said no. And I just thought I would get in trouble, and I would disappoint my parents if they knew.
We never knew about it. We never heard about it. She never told us anything about it. She kept it to herself all those years.
In your book, you say specifically that you don't say his name, right? You don't tell us who he is.
I don't want to give his name power. I don't want to take my hard-earned time and energy and my very good book and sully it with his name. And so he doesn't deserve to be named.
People who survive a trauma, maybe they've been raped, maybe they've been a victim of another crime. It can be actually a variety of really potentially devastating traumas, but they do survive. And the one thing I think never happens is really forgetting.
Bearing her secrets deep, Roxane chose to get away again and attended the prestigious boarding school, Phillips Exeter Academy. Once there, she turned her energy towards self-preservation.
When she left home, she was pretty much what I would call an average child as far as her physical appearance. Then, a few weeks later, we saw her, and we were surprised and shocked to see how much weight she had gained.
I gained quite a lot of weight in response because I thought, well, next time I'll be bigger and stronger. And also, if I'm bigger, perhaps they won't be interested in me. Because I saw how they treated fat kids. I saw how everyone treated fat kids. And I just wanted to do whatever I could to not have to go through something like that again.
We took her to see different doctors over the years, did tests, left, tests right. They couldn't find anything wrong.
I knew something else was wrong, but she was not going to talk. She wasn't ready.
When you keep that kind of a secret to yourself, it warps your relationships with everybody because you have this secret, and the more you have the secret, the more you nurture it. When you're holding on to that kind of shame, the shame only gets deeper and deeper because the less you talk about it, the more you start to believe it's something you cannot talk about.
Despite not being able to escape her suffering, Roxane excelled in school and went on to an Ivy League college. Introduce me to Roxane in college.
I started out college at Yale. And then at 19, I kind of had a breakdown.
What prompted the breakdown?
I had, this secret, and I wasn't really dealing with it. And I asked my parents, could I take a year off? And they said, no. And of course, they didn't have all the information, so they didn't even know what they were saying no to.
In retrospect, I'm sure if we knew then what we know now, we probably would have been better equipped to know how to help her.
So I was like, well, In August, before classes were about to start, I just decided to go across the country with an older man that I met on the internet back then. Oh, I know. And he didn't murder me.
You were on the internet back then?
I was on the internet in 1992.
And then what happens?
And then he flew me to San Francisco. And we went to some parties and had a very good time. And then he said, well, come live with me in Arizona. And I was like, sure. I was 19. Like, there's nothing more sound than going to Arizona with a 44-year-old man. But to his credit, again, he never did anything I didn't consent to. He never hurt me. He didn't chop me up and put me in a freezer. There is a God for broken people who sometimes just looks over you and keeps you alive despite your best efforts.
She's showing you, yes, I'm rising from all these experiences, but I'm not rising as this beautiful bird. I'm rising as someone who has bruises and broken bones and scars.
Following her brief rebellion, at 25, Roxane returned to school to complete her master's and would take the first steps towards becoming a real writer.
How did your 20s impact who you are today?
Lived quite a lot of life in those years. By the time I turned 30, I was still kind of a mess, but I was more interested in addressing the mess. I certainly did not find much writing success in my 20s, but I kept writing anyway. You know, I started to believe that there was a conspiracy theory against me, as one does. I would read about all these book deals that people were getting and just think, where's my book deal? And then I had to realize, oh, I haven't written a book. But I was always writing. Before I was publishing, I was submitting my work and getting rejected and getting deep in my feelings about that rejection, then just sending more work out. But I was still working and putting in the time and putting in the effort to become better.
The best advice she gives young writers is she tells them to not give up, to keep going. I mean, Roxane wrote for free for years and years and years just to be published, just to get her name out there. So she is one of the most persistent people I know. She never gave up.
So get a job you don't care about, that you can do very well. Yes, because when you take a job home with you, it takes up your writing time.
Right.
I still have a day job I haven't quite let go of. And so that to show you like how deep into your career you need to get before you can quit, just have a job. It could be anything. And treat your writing also like a job.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
In 2005, while studying for her PhD and teaching undergraduate classes, Roxane helped launch a literary magazine and began sharing her work with the world.
Pank magazine was publishing some of the best, most important, and just groundbreaking work in independent presses and independent lit. Every college student that I knew who was writing was desperate to get into Pank magazine.
We just wanted to build this place where people could share their writing. It just happened organically, like slowly but surely. So I started getting my work out there in this weird, unexpected way, and it would just kept parlaying into bigger opportunities.
And what was the moment? What was a breakthrough moment?
My first really gorgeous piece of writing was an essay I wrote for the Rumpus called The Careless Language of Sexual Violence. And I wrote it in a fury. I was writing about a New York Times article about a gang rape in Cleveland, Texas, and a young girl, 11 years old, was gang raped, and the article was about how the town was suffering after, and I was just outraged. How dare you worry about the town and the town's reputation and those poor boys? There were about 28 of them. So I felt no pity for them. They are rapists, and this was a child. This particular story hit home because of the young girl's age and that there were multiple assailants. That definitely resonated with my own story.
She turns everything hard to deal with, hard to reckon with, hard to understand into a beautiful, recognizable moment. It becomes a scene.
I knew exactly what I wanted to say in that essay, and it was just very satisfying to be able to articulate my feelings about what I was writing about.
That essay went well beyond the limits of the independent literature circle. And I think that that's when people in other spaces really started to take notice of her. It was like, oh, that's a nice essay. Also, here are 10 other amazing essays that this person has written. Who is she?
I'd been reading essays and short stories, and one of my clients mentioned Roxane Gay. Her name had just been popping up in front of me a lot, so I felt like, you know what, this is a sign of somebody who is going to have an amazing career. I knew I had to work with her.
After 2 decades of writing, the essay would prove to be Roxane's breakout moment. And in 2014, the world would finally hear the full power of her voice with her first nonfiction book, a collection of essays called Bad Feminist.
I was thinking through my relationship with feminism, which is something that I had, especially during my teens and 20s, thought, oh, I'm not a feminist. That's not me. Because I have some ideals that are inconsistent with feminist ideals.
Like?
For example, I was like, I enjoy men. But the more educated I became and the more I read and lived, the more I began to understand that that caricature is so wildly inaccurate and does not depict feminism or what it aims to do. With Bad Feminist, I think it was the first time we had seen someone writing about feminism in a way that was a little more accessible than feminism has traditionally been written about. And it was a way that allowed women to be flawed and be human. And as Black women, in particular, we deserve to be seen and heard and to be considered as part of the feminist movement. I reject the mainstream feminism that has historically ignored or deflected the needs of women of color, working class women, queer women, and transgender women in favor of supporting white, middle, and upper class straight women. Listen, if that's good feminism, I am a very bad feminist.
Anyone who has a feeling of other has a unique perspective in this country. And so she has many others, right? She's othered because her parents are immigrants. She's othered because she's a woman. She's othered because she's a person of color. She's othered because of, this sexual assault that she experienced, at 12 years old. And that's an othering experience for a lot of women because it puts you outside of, say, sexual norms. And so this concept of who belongs, I think, is at the root of all of her writing.
With Bad Feminist, Roxane had tapped into the zeitgeist. Her willingness to be completely open about her faults and contradictions helped make her the voice of a movement. It also proved to be incredibly successful.
When Bad Feminist went on sale, it was an Amazon Best Book of the Month, which was very exciting. And then it was a New York Times bestseller its first week, which again, I just been telling her that I thought it was gonna be.
I wonder whether the same you, working as hard as you work, creating as much as you create, would have had as much success 10 years ago. Or whether you've happened to come along at a moment where there's a meaningful desire for your kind of unapologetic inconsistency.
I would say I created the moment. It happened at the right time, but it happened because I willed it to happen.
She's got no time to waste, so I think that her directness is infectious. I think people love it, and I think she's, one of the few writers who feels really comfortable being as direct as she is.
Girl, you and Twitter. We need to talk about Twitter.
We can.
We're gonna talk about Twitter.
While the success of Bad Feminist catapulted Roxane to new levels of popularity, it also opened her up to personal attacks.
Do you feel like Twitter allows you, in some ways, to be a fuller version of who you are?
No, I don't. I think it just allows me to say what I want to say, when I want to say it, how I want to say it. I get to control the circumstances, and that's great. I think it's more of a controlled medium.
She has a lot of trolls out there too. I mean, people who are so vicious to her. It's just people who hate, people who don't like what Roxane has to say. They don't agree with what she has to say. They can be really, really awful. And it amazes me sometimes that she stays on Twitter.
Do you like the back and forth that I see you sometimes have on Twitter with...
Oh, no, I don't. I don't dislike it. I do it because it has to be done. Because it's important to show these bullies that you don't get to bully everyone. You don't have a carte blanche to say whatever you want to people simply because it comes into your head.
Deciding to fly in the face of her trolls, Roxane found the strength to be fully transparent with her readers and tackle her hardest and most personal book, her 2017 release, Hunger.
I wanted to write a book about what it means to live in the world in a fat body, and what is the history of this kind of body.
Hunger spoke to me just because I feel like she gave a little bit more about what had happened to her, about her trauma, about her size, and how she dealt with it. So I think that, to me, was one of the more eye-opening of her work, because she was talking about something that she's never talked about before.
I also taste hope. I taste the idea of having more choices when I go clothes shopping. I taste the idea of fitting into seats at restaurants, movie theaters, waiting rooms. I taste the idea of walking into a crowded room or through a mall without being stared at and pointed at and talked about. I taste the idea of grocery shopping without strangers taking food they disapprove of out of my cart or offering me unsolicited nutrition advice. I taste the idea of being free of the realities of living in an overweight body. I taste the idea of being free.
Comfortable in your body today?
Oh, no.
No, even today?
I think that the world is very inhospitable to bodies like mine.
Have you found a form of therapy that actually helped?
Therapy has been useful throughout my life. I've gone off and on since I was 14. It's only now, after having written Hunger, that I've been in a position to really deal with a lot of the issues that are underlying.
That feeling or that thing I went through, I'm not the only person who went through that. I'm not the only person who feels that way. If this book was a bestseller for how many weeks? It can't just be me and Roxane. So I'm not the only one, and she's not the only one.
For me, a lot of it was just turning 40 and realizing that I don't have to apologize for myself, that I'm not a problem, and that has been very freeing.
With her biggest success to date and nothing left to hide, Roxane has let herself move past the hardest parts of her life and is now open to living in the present.
I know you said that 40 was such a wonderful turning point in many ways.
The sense of self that I've developed, and I won't say I'm a confident person, but I'm definitely more at ease with myself and just accepting, like, this is who I am. It's very freeing to just stop beating yourself up for just being human.
I think she feels somewhat liberated. She let out what was bothering her, and now she feels that she has nothing to hide.
She called herself a bad feminist. She's messy. There's no clean lines about how she thinks about things. To me, I related to that. I mean, we are messy people. There can't be this one rigid, narrow way of thinking or being. That's what's so appealing about Roxane. I think she really relates to people because she's real.
And today, where are you in your mind? A literary career mainly, or teaching career?
I'm at the end of my teaching career, for sure.
End? Why end?
Because I don't need the money. And with my speaking schedule, something had to give, and it's certainly not going to be my writing.
Where's your writing going to take you next?
I think my writing is going to take me into film and television next.
Ooh, like?
I'm working on a screenplay for my fiction novel, An Untamed State, which I'm co-writing with Gina Prince Bythewood, and I'm working on a couple TV projects. So many unexpected opportunities have come my way that hopefully I get better as a writer and thinker.
I've read 2 of your books. I've read Bad Feminist, I've read Hunger twice, and I really, really good. Really. And she schlepped me here from Brooklyn. She schlepped me.
Oh my God, all the way from Brooklyn?
No, she lives in the valley now.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys have a great night.
Oh, we will.